Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. Games get 10 times better when Michelob Ultra is on the line, so race to the bottom of a slope. Winner gets an Ultra. Or enter at michelobultra.com/ultra instructor for a chance to win tickets to the hottest sporting events of 2026. Michelob Ultra, Ultra Instructor, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 plus. Begins on January 30th, 2026. Ends on February 22nd, 2026. See official rules at michelobultra.com/rules for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
Come meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. No Alan Medlock this time around again as he gets ready for the Tulsa Hell baseball season, but we are joined by one of the many voices, longtime voices of the Cardinals. It's Jim the Cat Hayes. Jim, how are you tonight?
Daniel, I'm doing great, but like I told you before we started recording, the Knicks are losing, and that bothers me a little bit. But I will soldier through.
It is tough to have to deal with these kind of things, but you know, we as Cardinal fans, maybe we have to get used to that for a little bit going forward. It has been a year since we've been able to talk. It has been an eventful year for you. How are things just in general?
Things are good. If you're asking about whether or not I'll be back, I'm going to wait for the Cardinals to make an announcement. I'll have a role, but let's leave that up to them. But I've been following along very closely. I do a podcast called Cardinals Territory. Can I plug that? Is that all right if I do?
Absolutely.
So I do that with that constant delight, Lance Lynn, Matt Holliday, and Kyle Gibson, all wealthy former players, which makes organizing that show like herding cats. But we do it on the Foul Territory platform where AJ Przinsky and Rosenthal and big name guys do their thing. So we joined that a while ago, and those guys are a little down on what's going on. I actually understand it, and I think Heim's doing a really good job. I mean he's been very transparent. I think his honesty um, has won over some fans. I think everyone can understand listening to him that he's a very bright guy. And like you said, I think fans understand that they kind of had to rip the band-aid off and let some healing take place. So, they call it a build now after they brought in Heim and Mo said goodbye. They said it was going to be a reset. Now it's a build. Lance Lynn says it's a tear down to the studs. But I think he's doing what a builder has to do is you before you build, you have to stockpile building materials, and he's done that, and the materials look to be good. But as you know, prospects are just that, prospects. You don't know what they're going to be, so you get a bunch of them. They're like scratch off lottery tickets. Some you win, some you don't. And either way, you go and you get yourself a nice beverage and you leave the convenience store. But that's kind of how I look at things.
Yeah, I would say that that's a fair way to look at that. I do want to circle back about the podcast and talk a little bit about that. But do you think that if Holiday, Lynn, those kind of guys are a little bit less excited about this just because they have that competitive instinct that they live through such good Cardinal times that it's hard for them to imagine what a rebuilding Cardinal team looks like?
Yes, I think you nailed it. And Gibson was only here 1 year, but
Mhm.
Holiday, Lynn had 2 tours. And yeah, look, I'm not a cliche guy, but they were part of the Cardinal way and all that. And so I just think that they looked at it as the Cardinals needed to spend money to get back in
Mhm.
it, that it didn't need a tear down. That's their view, not mine.
Right.
And they are, Cardinals through and through. Now Holiday's got, kids in baseball now, as
Mhm.
sons with the Orioles, and so there's other teams that he has a vested interest in. But I think both those guys harken back to, hey, when we played, it wasn't let's try to get in, let's win it all. And so it does, I think, hit them differently when it's like, yeah, give us time. They look at the payroll, what it is now, and all that. I disagree with them, but our podcast, were, they, pile on me sometimes. I just try to be fair, but we have different perspectives on that, and they come from a much different place. And I got to say, they're all three of those guys are really, really smart guys.
I will say, you started the podcast as serving it up and then moved it into to Cardinals territory. When you were putting this podcast together, you have known a lot of former Cardinals, and yet you picked 2 guys that love to give you the hardest time on this. What was your thinking about grabbing these guys?
Well, because they're smart, they're funny,
Mhm.
and they're entertaining. And look, my whole thing is, there should be pushback. There should be back and forth. I've never been, there's a little bit of showman.
Mhm.
I like to think in what I do,
Right.
and fun, as opposed to spitting out stats or, to me, it's always been about the players, the personalities, and those guys have big personalities, and I have a good relationship with them. So going back even further, when I say we, I'm not a full-time employee, since FanDuel does not, I don't think they
Mhm.
exist in the baseball space, as
Right.
they say. But back
Right.
when it was Bally's, they wanted me to do an off-season YouTube podcast, with just getting guests, and talk for a half
Mm.
hour. And I
Like your
think
old
that
cat
was,
chats.
yeah, there was cat chats. Then there was Cat's Corner that we did, that
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
a Bally's production, though I got to keep the YouTube content. And I could have done that again, but I forget who I was talking to or texting with. It was one of those guys, Holiday or Lynn, and they said they'd be into it. So I thought I'd rather do that, where let's get a cast of regulars. Matt Carpenter will be in sometimes. I think Loesch has been in. Once in a while, we'll get a player as a guest. But I think those guys are so smart, and because they're funny and there's a good relationship, I figured let's do it that way. So if you haven't heard, it's Cardinal territory, and it's those guys beating me up a little bit, and me mocking the fact that they're sitting on piles of cash and I'm not.
And usually in their cars as well, it seems like.
Well, that's
Um,
the herding of cats.
yeah.
Like there's a difference between a professional athlete. Those guys played. They're very wealthy. They got families. They're all family guys. And unlike me, like when I have to do a podcast or whatever it is, I'm a pseudo professional. I'll put a tie on, brush my hair, be ready. If it's radio, I do a radio show on the Lou Information Station. That's available online too. Um, but I show up on time. I'm pseudo prepared. When you're those guys, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I got to bring my kids to work out or this and that. So sometimes there's cars. Sometimes Matt Holiday's kids are in the car. Sometimes Kyle Gibson is on vacation somewhere. Lance, I gotta say, has been pretty buttoned down. He's usually in the same spot. I think Lance would like to be in broadcasting and do more.
Mhm.
He's done some stuff for MLB and stuff like that, but he's decent looking guy. He's smart and he's funny and has opinions. I think all these guys would be really good. And can I just say this about Holiday,
Mhm.
because there's misconceptions. He was going to be their bench coach, and then he
Mhm.
wasn't. And it was like, I get this on the radio sometimes. Holiday knew that a mess was coming. That's what Holiday, he had a kid that was going to be the number one pick. He had another kid that's in the pipeline. And I just think he forgot how important that is. And I think
Mhm.
as it got closer and closer, he realized he can't give up that part of his life, seeing his
Right.
kids play. And that was really the real reason. He's got a great relationship with Ollie. He loves the Cardinals, but that's really what happened. As it got closer, he realized I'm not going to be able to see my kid do this or the other kids when they're playing sports. And I think it weighed on him until he said, I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, because a job like that's always gonna be there, even if it's not with the Cardinals somewhere, Matt Holliday is always gonna have an opportunity to be in baseball because of what he's done and what he knows, but you don't get those moments back of watching your kid play college ball or being there when he's ready to be the number 1 pick, so, yeah, it completely made sense. I was very surprised when he took the job in the first place, just knowing that's the kind of person he was.
I think sometimes the players that are recently retired don't want to lose their place. And this is
Mhm,
just me. This wasn't ever a Holiday saying it, but this is what I sense. Because every year, more players retire,
mm,
and then next thing you know, 3, 4 years go by, and you haven't been on the scene. Cardinal fans will always remember Matt Holliday, but I think they're concerned about losing their place in line and maybe being too far removed from the game. And by the way, Daniel, it's not just professional athletes that are sitting on millions of dollars of cash, but it's also mediocre sideline reporters who will not get to see their kid pitch.
mhm,
So
yeah.
we all have to make our sacrifices.
Yeah, yeah, and that has to be a difficult part of your job, and I know you were able to kind of juggle things at times, but for the most part, you're on the air, and that does mean that other things have to take the back burner, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens for this season. Maybe I'll have a little more time to watch my kid, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Um, but yeah, we forget too that professional athletes, though they're making all the money in the world, and
Mhm,
I've seen it firsthand. They have problems too. Now, granted,
right.
if you're a married guy with a wife and 3 kids at home or whatever, and a kid twists an ankle or a pipe breaks in the house, they have the financial wherewithal to get help there in a second. But the being away and not being there to help, they're human beings too. And I've always been keenly aware of that because I've witnessed it. I've seen stuff on the road where I could see the player has something at home that needs to be tended to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's even gets into, the backlash that's, thankfully is lesser now when a player takes off for the birth of a child, right? It used to be a lot of people just kind of, brought their pitchforks out and says, "Why aren't you playing ball? Because that's your job." I think we're getting a little bit more accommodating to the fact that these are real people. There's still a long way to go.
And I also think in baseball, there's so many games, but we see in other sports
Mhm.
where he needs a recovery day, or in the NBA, they have a lot of maintenance days, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I think the professional athlete as a human being, yes, we're starting to see a little bit more of that. Now, sometimes a player will have a professional basketball team they want to they want to go watch the championship game. Fans do not like that at all, as I recall. They don't like that, as
No,
I recall.
that will linger for quite some time for sure.
It's over because
Um,
Yachty is such an iconic figure, and the fact that he'll be part of this year with the young catchers, and they got some talent at the catcher
mhm,
position.
mhm.
But just the smile on his face when he came back and he was in the dugout, and the reaction from the fans, I think that's a positive. I really do, and I think this time because Yachty has eyes on managing, I think he feels differently and will be in that role differently. So I think it's a good first step for the club and for Yachty.
There's a lot of people that would say, Yachty took that job under Mo and then just didn't show up, and there were a lot of different reasons for that, but then now that Mo's out of the picture, here comes Yachty. Do you think there was anything to that, that there's the change in front office people, or is it just the change in where Yachty is in his life?
It's where Yachty is. Look, Mo's an easy scapegoat now,
Right,
and
right.
I see a lot of folks, or I did see a lot of folks, what they're treating him like a pinata on the way out the door. He did a lot of great things, had some great relationships with players, but Yachty wants to manage, right? So
Mhm.
you can't have it on your resume that you were an assistant, and weren't around, and I don't think Yachty would blame that on Mo. He just knows that there's some things he's got to do to get to where he wants to be, and I think he's in a different place right now.
Yeah, and I'm looking for and it feels like I've heard other people talk about, this job is much more defined and much more, focused on teaching and then rather than some sort of general just be around the team type of thing, and I think that's probably helpful as well to know your role.
And they're what top in their top 10 prospects, three are catchers.
Mhm.
So
Right.
he's got some value to work with. I Of all the things that have happened this offseason, nothing really took me by surprise, except for the fact I thought a catcher would be dealt along the way. So
Mhm.
you got three guys, major league experience with Herrera coming back, and you got three catching prospects. And like everything's currency. I've learned that along the way. Like controllable talent is the best currency to have in baseball. So I thought somewhere that would be a pot sweetener to get something done.
Yeah, it is a little bit surprising. Now, we know that Herrera wants to catch, and the Cardinals say that they're gonna give him a shot to catch. Do you think that he will actually wind up being, like, the main catcher this year?
I I don't, but I'll put an asterisk on that. I wouldn't put anything past him. So
Mhm.
Herrera told me last year that he wanted to catch, but he had that elbow problem and he had to get that. He told me, he said, don't tell anyone, don't report it, but he needs to have a surgical procedure to get whatever that excess, I'm not a doctor, but removed from his elbow because he said, I'm embarrassed because I can't throw, and it's because I can't get my arm in the right throwing position. He went to drive line. They worked with him on his pop time, and they said your arm has to be here, and he couldn't get in that position because of his elbow. Now,
Mhm.
defensively, I would say he's not a 5-star defensive catcher, but if you recall, he wasn't as good as he is now offensively. But he retooled everything with his swing. Like I forget it was a few years ago now, but when he was in the
Mhm.
minors and worked his tail off to become the hitter he is today. And is there a chance he can do that with catching? Yeah. Now he told me, I thought he was kidding. He said, I already talked to Heim. And this is before the Cardinals announced that they looked at him as a catcher.
Mhm.
But he said he talked to Heim, and Heim said he can catch. And he said, don't say anything until Heim does. So I waited. And literally 3 weeks later, Heim mentioned that. So, yeah.
I'm gonna be very interested to see because, for me on the outside looking in, it felt a little bit like when the Cardinals would tell Trevor Rosenthal to come and prepare to be a starter, and then he just never actually got a chance to be the starter, right? He just was ready for it, but then it just never turned out. And it kind of felt to me a little bit like telling Herrera to come to catch camp ready to be a catcher, but there was no guarantees that was actually going to happen.
Yeah, I would say there's still no guarantees, but I don't think you want to mess with a guy who could be one of your best players, a young
Right,
guy
right.
leader. So I think they'll give him an opportunity. It's up to him to sink or swim.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see. Of course, he's playing in the World Baseball Classic. How far they go and how much that impacts what he can do in camp this year.
Absolutely. I just know they look at him as a building piece, young
Mhm.
guy. I mean, even the veteran guys like Holiday rave about his swing and how he has the makings of a guy who could be able to drive the ball. They don't look at Bush as much of a home run park, but they
Right.
think he's a doubles guy and home runs on the road.
Well, and we saw that last year, and there's no doubt that if he can continue to do what he's doing, they'll find a place for him wherever it may be. They'll get that bat in the lineup for sure.
Absolutely, and he can DH. Look, he was going to play outfield last year. He hadn't played that ever. He's athletic, and I also like the fact that hey, we're going to put you in the outfield. You okay with that? Sure, just put me out there as long as I get to swing the bat a little bit.
That's the important thing. Let's talk a little bit about the people that left this offseason. A lot of veterans, and then, of course, Brendan Donovan going out last week. Um, for you as a person that has those relationship with these players, you interview them, you talk with them on a regular basis. What are you gonna miss about those guys? Sonny and Wilson and Nolan, and then, of course, Brendan.
All right, so Arenado to me is the pro's pro.
Mhm.
Didn't love talking, but I'll tell you this: he didn't turn me down very often. I also knew to pick my spots, but I would say, can we get you? Even if he's an 0 for 18, he would do it.
Yeah.
Like I would say, 1 out of 7 or 8 times, he'd say, "Can I not do it today?" Like he'd ask. Like he was
Yeah.
pro's pro, and I know he wanted to win, and I know he wasn't happy with the way he played. Um, I look at him and Goldie at the same time, kind of going off the
Mhm.
cliff, kind of changed everything to me. Because
Yeah.
though you think about it, those guys should still be, tearing up baseballs. Now, Goldie, I guess, is going back to New York. He's part of Team USA. That's cool, and I hope that Nolan bounces back and becomes the offensive player. I mean, he's still young enough to be able to, to tear
Mhm.
things up. But yeah, I really liked Arenado. Donovan was great, except I'll be honest with you, he would never go on camera for a pregame interview because he said it got in the way of his preparation. Always
Mhm.
nice, always glad to do post game, but he hated the moving to the dugout to do interviews. Wonderful guy, but that was the thing with Don. He didn't want to do those. Wilson, wonderful guy, almost always available, also fun to talk to, um, an emotional guy. I'll miss that because he's an energy guy. Even he admitted this year that there were times it was bad energy. If he was in a slump, he said he needed to be a better, more positive leader. And with Sonny, the thing I'll miss about him is you didn't really have to ask more than 2 questions because you ask one and he'll give you 4 or 5 minutes. That's all we need.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what with Sonny, like you didn't have to come with many questions, even good questions, because he took it where he wanted to go, which I admire. And really one of the most interesting guys I've ever covered, just because he was so thoughtful in everything he did. And I had this ongoing battle with my radio partners because I said, Sonny is like the baseball guy. He walks around with a baseball in his pocket, it tucked in his jeans, and they go, he doesn't always. He just, when they signed him, he went to the news conference. He had a base, and I would check that dude had a baseball in his pocket when I see him, like, on the road. Every once in a while, you see him on the road on a bike. Like he would rent a bike and drive around whatever city. Um, Interesting guy. He liked to. He was big on connecting with the earth, so he'd be on the field and with his bare feet because he felt he gained strength from that. But everything he did was intentional and thoughtful and a fascinating guy.
Yeah, all of those guys, the Cardinals will miss. But I also think it goes to the point that the Cardinals spent the money on all those players. Well, except for Brendan Donovan, who hadn't quite gotten to the payday yet. But they spent quite a bit of money bringing those other three in, and it didn't work. Not from anything that they did, but for whatever reason, it wasn't that time in the Cardinal cycle, and it feels like we get back to what we were saying, it was time to kind of break it back down and refocus it.
And so now the question is, which of these guys? I mean, they have stacked prospects. Like, they went from, what, top five, top three pipelines in
Mhm.
minor league baseball, with all the talent they've stockpiled. And that last move, they bring in 2 former first rounders, a second round pick, and 2 comp picks. Pretty good, and that already added to the moves that they've made, bringing in some young talent. So even if guys don't pan out, or which has been the case for Cardinal minor league pitchers, like, man, all of them seem to have some kind of injury or something that set them back. So this way, you have more options and more possibilities of of having a couple of these guys fire, and next thing you know, they're on your major league roster.
Yeah, and that's the hope for sure, and, the Cardinals need that. That pitching is a side of things that has been a struggle as of late. Even the current rotation, which I know has some opportunities and some possibilities, is not necessarily gonna be rated as one of the strengths of this team.
So to me, that's the like. I think they'll hit a little bit. Look, are they gonna be, 90-win team? Of course not.
Right.
But I think there's going to be some exciting play, and to be honest, I thought they'd get I didn't think Ramos would be the guy, the right-handed bat, which I get it, and what he can be. I thought they would get a more of a veteran with more of a resume, but I still think they can do some things offensively. The pitching can be. I mean, it's kind of a cop out, but it could be really good or it could be really scary. Like I
Mhm.
don't know because you got a lot. You're going to lean on a lot of young guys. So I'll break it. I love Libby. I think he learned a lot about being a starter last year, and I think he's going to be very good. Um, you know who the guy that I think sneaky is going to be really good, and he's not even guaranteed a spot in the rotation, but Leahy. I
Mm.
love that guy. And he's got a whole variety of pitches he can throw. He's got a lot of different weapons to use. He's got like sort of like Libby, a rubber arm. He just wants the ball. He's really the probably the most quiet guy in the clubhouse. But when he's on the mound, you can see how intense he is, and he wants to start. Not like Rosenthal. I don't know if you ever heard Matt Holliday do his Rosenthal. I'm going to tell Tony I'm a starter, but this is different, and he's like because of what's in his arsenal. I think he's going to be a guy that might surprise some people. So there's a lot of options that are going to be exciting to watch. Another guy that the veteran guys on the podcast always bring up. They think Palante should still be under consideration
Hmm.
because of everything he's learned and because of how hard he works. And he's had good stretches and bad stretches too.
Yeah, it feels like, last year the Cardinals went all year long with basically the same starters. Fetty got traded and or waived or whatever, and then but other than that, it was pretty much the same guys. Nobody got hurt. That doesn't seem to be the case this year, right? There's gonna be, besides most likely injuries, there's gonna be opportunities for them to swap somebody in. Maybe it's Palante starts in the bullpen and then moves to the rotation for some starts if he looks good. It feels like there's a lot more flexibility about where pitchers are going to be.
Yeah, so they used to say, we got 6, 7 starters, we're good. Well, last year the Cardinals with injuries got pretty lucky in that rotation. I mean, we've seen over the years you need 9 or 10 guys
Yeah.
sometimes, and maybe that's not enough. But with what Fitz, Dobbins, who knows with Quinn Matthews? I mean, there's other guys, and some of the guys are already in the Cardinals minor league pipeline that could step in and play big roles. We don't know, so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in spring training and how it all shakes out.
Speaking of Dobbins and Fitz especially, have you had a chance to connect with any of the new Cardinals coming in, or is that something that will wait until things are more settled?
That will wait because I haven't really talked. I missed the winter warm up for the first time in
Mhm.
25 years, I think, something like that. Yeah, right now we're going to let the Cardinals kind of guide the way as to what's going on. But yeah, I miss that. Like, there's some media guys that make fun of the winter warm up. I love it. One, because I like the fans. Like the,
Mhm.
the fans. I'm a New Yorker, right? That's where I came. I mean, I didn't come from there. I came from Philly, East Coast, but I'm originally a New Yorker. And Cardinal fans have always been nice to me. Always. I'm not talking about, a chirp or a troll here on there on Twitter or anything, but Cardinal fans have always been nice. So I make a special effort to let fans know that I appreciate them. And part of that is I'd like being at the winter warm up and shaking hands and taking a picture with fans here and there. And I didn't get to go because, to be honest, I don't want to get over my skis here.
Right. Mhm.
Like, and then plus I didn't know what to tell people, so I didn't go. And I miss seeing the fans, Cardinal fans. I fight with people all the time. Like it's a joke. Best fans in baseball, B Fibs. By the way, Joe Strauss, always loved him, always will think about him all the time. That's his thing. But Cardinal fans are great. I know that. You know why? Because I've traveled to every city with this club, and they're everywhere, and they're nice, and they're friendly. And if you don't mind me, when I first started, like 25 years ago, and moved to St. Louis, I was with Fox in Kansas City for 6 months before they moved me here to do Cardinals baseball. And I come from New York and grew up a Yankees fan, and that's a great baseball town.
Mhm.
But I remember just walking around with my dog, and you could hear in the house, it was either radio or TV. Like I knew right away that the baseball team in St. Louis is so interwoven in the fabric of this area that it's really remarkable. And that's, sure it's cliche and everything, but it's true. It's really true. So I miss seeing the fans at the winter warm up. Hopefully, this season around the ballpark, I'll get to see some of them again.
Yeah. And no matter how things go, like you said, Bally's FanDuel is no longer a viable interest for baseball in St. Louis, and that means there's relationships there that are not the same for you anymore. I know you and I both know Jeff Goldman, who is over there, who's a great guy, and I've been thinking about him quite a bit during all this because that is uncertainty about for those people, but y'all don't have the same connection because you're not working under the same roof anymore.
Yeah, I talked to him, and I don't know what's going to happen with Goldman, but I will
Mhm.
tell you this. And I'm an arrogant guy. You know I'm arrogant because I say I should be in front of the camera or on a microphone. But he's much smarter than me. Jeff Goldman is the smartest guy in that building. And
Mm.
he knows content, he knows marketing, he knows programming. I wish someone if I don't know what's going to happen with him. Somehow he's going to stay in the company, go to the Cardinals. I don't know, but he deserves to have a job because he is smart and one of the few guys who will tell me, Jim, don't do that. That's stupid, and I'll go okay because I know he's smarter than me.
He's a good guy. There's no doubt about it. I've known him. He kind of connected with the bloggers as we were just getting started, and been able to keep that relationship up. It's great, and I'm hopeful like you that he'll have something that's solid pretty soon. While we're talking about the media side of things, though, on different, it's been a tumultuous time, I guess, for St. Louis media this offseason. Katie Wu, Alexa Dot, now John Denton. Um, is it surprising to you how much turnover there is and that maybe some of these people aren't going to be replaced?
Yes, but that's the changing of landscape. First, let me say
Mhm.
this: like the other two, went for better jobs, so that's good.
Right.
Or jobs closer to whatever. Denton got fired. Denton is one of the hardest working guys and nicest guys you could ever uh, get to hang out with in a clubhouse. And another guy who deserves better, but he's a veteran and he understands the nature of this thing. But he writes, he turns over. Like I was amazed by the amount of work they made him, put out every day. Between notebooks and newsletters. Same with Derek Gould.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
guys and all the guys at the Post Dispatch. All those guys work hard. But Denton deserves better. But listen, the whole landscape changed, and I saw it when people started cutting the cord, at least from,
Mhm.
in my little bubble, and those subscriber fees that all the cable companies got went away.
Yes.
You think about it, I forget the numbers, and it's not really my alley, so to speak, or my lane. But originally, what were the Cardinals supposed to get from FanDuel? Like it was like 60
I think it
something
was like
million.
75
70,
million on that first
72,
contract. Yeah.
right? Yeah. And then it was cut and cut and cut. And I've
Mhm.
had smart people explain it to me that if you're not getting these subscriber fees, right?
Right.
Because it used to be everyone that had your in this big cable universe where they were just, three or four big carriers and everyone kicked in this pot to carry, say, Fox Sports Midwest, that started going by the wayside. And I was like, well, that's it's happened ever since where it's down. All right, the streaming thing. Well, the streaming hasn't picked up in terms of financially making up for that difference. I also thought with the gambling coming into the forefront, I thought it was smart to be Bally's and then FanDuel, but
Mhm.
that's just naming rights. You know, people think we're owned by FanDuel, or we weren't.
Right.
But it just wasn't enough to overcome the huge amount of losses. Then you factor in maybe the team wasn't playing as well, and maybe the ratings weren't good. Things that are over my head. But to me, like the loss of those subscriber fees and the whole changing landscape on that front, that's when I saw the big shift. And I still think people love sports. I think the stuff that bloggers and podcasts, people read and listen to that more than ever. The first guy that I can remember talking about podcasts, like, oh, all I do is listen to podcasts, was Tim McKernan
Mm.
from TMA on 101 in St. Louis. And, darn if he wasn't right. Like, the whole thing has changed. Podcasting, YouTube channels. Charlie Marlowe's another guy in a local media that went to do his own YouTube thing. These guys were ahead of the curve. And those guys in that realm have taken a big chunk out of what was traditional broadcast stuff.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, you can find so many things that really hit home for you, right? You don't have to be stuck with the big generic thing. You can get the prospect guys that like Brian Walton and all those kind of things, or you can get, talk about the big club with, your podcasts and everything else. It's an interesting and it's a very varied environment, but it does shake up the paradigm.
And the truth is that I'll be honest about it. I've known this for a long time. I've always tried to be, nice to the guys that had the blogs and the podcasts, because a lot of times they're smarter than the guys that are doing it, for more money. And they're also, in some cases, might even have more passion about it. So I always had respect for you guys because you did a good job. Um, but yeah, that's part of the change in the landscape too.
Well, as somebody that was just last week saying Brendan Donovan was going to stay a Cardinal, I don't know that you can say that there's any smarts over here, but
Listen. There's no one gets it right. There's no one gets it right a lot, and by that point, I mean, with Heim saying I don't have to trade him, all right, then maybe I thought I wasn't sure one way or the other. I think the last guy is JoJo, right? I
yeah.
mean, you should be trading. I just thought you got JoJo, you got catching prospects, something's going to happen where they bring something a little more exciting back. But as tell people on the radio, it's certainly not rocket science. But I'm excited to see Mason win, take it to the next level. Not just because he'll be better, but because I mean people don't understand how much pain he was with that knee last
Mhm.
year. So he'll have two good knees. He'll also be smarter. I think that guy's going to end up stealing bases, and he'll figure out the pull side power, and I think we'll see some home runs out of him. I think Weatherhold, I said on the radio, because I guess I'm just a fanboy, but he's to me, he's making the team
Mhm.
and might be National League Rookie of the Year. Like that's now I haven't been to his games. I don't try to pretend like I'm an expert because all I do is look at the stats and look at the clips. I don't have a library of Weatherholt. I like everyone else. Like on my phone,
Right.
look at what he does, the highlights from when he was in the minors. I'm just high, and I've interviewed him, I think a couple times now. He just exudes a guy who will be there. So I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic. I think Herrera's going to be really good. I'm a big Burley guy. Like to me, Burley still is scratching the surface of what he can be. A guy with power, line drive power, but power, a guy who isn't going to strike out a lot, who can use the whole field, who's still learning the craft. I think there's some weapons they have offensively that they may just be fine.
Well, and that brings us then to the biggest questions probably offensively, which are Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker, two guys that have struggled in their careers, have had some opportunities, maybe not as many as they should. What do you think this year looks like for those guys that now with these trades should have plenty of openings?
So I know guys that talk to Walker and have worked with him and say the swing looks great, but they always say that, right? I mean, every year,
Right.
everyone's in the best shape of their life. Everyone's, this year it's the kick change, but there's always something new and everything's great. Um, I was surprised because last year, and I thought it was interesting that Walker went down to Double A and worked with the hitting coach there,
Mhm.
and he said that the main thing was cutting out the noise and just being simple and just making sure that his body was moving forward. Every movement has to be forward. And as you recall, he came up and I think he had a good month. And I was like, they fixed it.
Mhm.
And then he didn't have a good month. And then the swing kind of looked like it was before. So I don't know what the answer is for Walker, except a lot of people that know baseball more than me are like, he'll find it. Stick with that guy because he's a unique talent. What with his size, his strength, his power, he'll get it. And then with Gorman, um, I just wonder. I mean, he has amazing power. If
Mhm.
Gorman is a 30 home run hitter but hits 220, I can live with that, right? Couldn't you?
Probably so. I mean, it probably depends on how the rest of the team's going, but it definitely is a very productive 220.
Yeah, and I'm not talking Jed Jerko, 25 homers and 48 RBIs. Like, you got to do a little bit more than that. And don't get me wrong, it's not a shot at Jed. I love him. Um, and I think Gorman can get there. I mean, there were times too it looked like he found it, and I just think that power is so unique. Um, but he's got to cut down on the strikeouts. He's got to be a little bit more disciplined. But I remember him talking about last year, especially toward the end, saying he's not results oriented. They want him in terms of numbers and everything. Follow the process. Stay with the process. So I mean, and he seemed to be mentally in a good place. Like I know that I will get through this if I follow the process. So I will follow the process with him.
Do you think either one of those guys is going to be adversely affected by the fact that this is probably make or break for both of them? I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to be good this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think more so on Gorman than Walker. I think because
Mhm.
Walker can do more things than Gorman. Um, I just get the impression. And look, Gorman doesn't necessarily come across great in the post game interviews. Um, he's a really good guy and he cares. And I think there's a ton of pressure that this has to be the year for him. But I honestly think he's mature enough to understand that and to handle it. So, I don't know if he's going to make it this year or Walker. I hope they do. I think they have the talent to do it. And yes, they feel the pressure. But I think Gorman in particular is going to be under the microscope more than Walker, just because, again, Walker can do a little bit more than Gorman in terms of what he brings to the table.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I mean, you're talking about how good those guys are and everything. I was wondering, you've been around the Cardinals for 20 plus years, and it feels to me, looking from the outside looking in, they've had really good character guys for the most part. Not naming any names, were there any that just didn't click with you at all?
Yeah. There were who was the one guy? God, Troy Gloss. Now I'm not saying
Mm,
he's a bad guy,
right.
um, but he was kind of a mercenary when he was here, and I got that. So to me, he didn't seem like he was like your prototypical Cardinal. Hit for power, though. I'll tell you that. And then the other guy, this is going way back, and he's a nice man. but it bothered me a little because I grew up a Yankee fan and I used to
Mhm,
really love Tino Martinez.
mhm.
And he just got here, and it's not New York, and they're not the Yankees, and they weren't particularly good that year. And his teammates would tell me he hates it here. And he wasn't always like that friendly. And I was like, that was disappointing to me because I
Yeah,
was a Tino guy from Nyack, New York. And
yeah.
again, that's not a reflection of either guy's character, just the way they seem to fit in the clubhouse.
Well, and both of those guys were filling big shoes, right? I mean, Tino comes in after McGuire retires. Gloss is traded for Scott Rowland, who obviously was demanding out, but still, there's a fan base there that doesn't necessarily know what to make of the new guys, and that probably didn't help anything.
And there's certain guys that come with a total respect, almost an admiration for St. Louis. But if you're Tino
Mhm.
Martinez, you're coming from the Yankees, you got a winning pedigree. I could understand that it's a little bit different and it's an adjustment. For Troy Glaus, he was fine. Like he'd just go on to the next. I don't even know how many teams he played for, but it seems like a
I don't
bunch.
remember.
And he crushed the ball too. I mean, he was
Mhm.
pretty good as a Cardinal.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Those are guys. I mean, and granted, they wouldn't be in the St. Louis area, but even so, I don't hear about them. Maybe they're doing baseball somewhere else, but Tino, maybe he's doing some stuff up in New York, but they're not guys that you hear about much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Tino, I think about the short porch at Yankee Stadium.
Hmm.
They didn't have one in St. Louis, so I don't know. I think I remember Tino was doing some media somewhere for a while, but I don't, he still could be. I just don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like that's a situation where he could be, but um, other markets are hard enough to. We don't need to keep up with him. We got enough going
Right.
on in
Yeah.
St. Louis. Um, So to wrap this up, then I've been asking everybody else the same last kind of question, and that is, if you're looking at one guy on this team this year, from whatever reason, you know, whatever the explanation, what is the one guy you are focusing on for 2026?
It's it's a hackneyed answer. I'm a hackneyed guy, but I'm all in on Mason Wynn. Not that that's a surprise, but I just don't think people realize how good this guy can be. We've seen the Gold Glove. We've seen unbelievable plays. I think he's already one of the best. I mean, he's a Gold Glover. Um, but again, playing with a bad knee. And here's another thing that might not come through. But I've talked to Ollie about it. My view is Mason Wynn is a leader on this team. Was last year, young guy. There were veterans around. I just think he has the respect of everyone in there, and I'm looking forward to that guy just taking a huge step forward and being even more exciting. So that's the guy I'm focused on. I really like Herrera. I'm curious to see what he does, but I'm going to be looking at Mason Wynn.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Because I love. I mean, again, and I've said this before on the podcast, but it's a guy that grew up watching Ozzy to see a shortstop come in with that kind of flair and that kind of approach. It's been a lot of fun, and it feels like the Cardinals are starting to embrace that on the media side of things too. We've seen a few promotions and things of that nature going on with him, and it seems like, I don't know that I want to say that they're making him the face of the franchise or anything, but it feels like that might not be too far away.
Well, they should, because kids love Mason Wynn. You're always trying to appeal to the younger Cardinal fans, and I'm just telling you, that guy is a dynamic player, and he's only going to get better. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Well, Jim, I appreciate you joining me tonight. Hopefully the Knicks will come back for you, and
Thank you.
you won't be all depressed for the evening. And we hope everything works out, and we will see you on TV all summer long, because it wouldn't be the same without you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I always enjoy coming on with you. So thanks for opening up a slot for me.
Always going to be one for you, Jim.
Thank you.
Next week we'll have Bernie Michaelis join us. But until then, for Jim, I'm Daniel. Good night.
What's the new phrase that you've come up with to get rid of someone like me?
이제 미디어가 이제 항상 와가지고 이제 클럽하우스에서도 선수들도 귀찮게 하고 이제 많은 질문을 던지고 있는데, 이제 짐 같은 이제 리포터를 빨리 쫓아내기 위해서 또 던져줄 문구라든지 이런 게 있다면은 새로운 게 어떤 게 있는지 물어보겠습니다. Hey Jim, go do something.